Hey guys, tonight we're trading medieval misery for something a bit more sparkly. Imagine a world where mullets are majestic, synthesizers rule the airwaves, and everybody is convinced that the answer to loneliness is found in a tiny pressed pill. That's right, we're plunging headfirst into the 1980s, the decade when MDMA, yes, that MDMA, waltzed out of the lab and straight into your therapist's office, your favourite nightclub, and, let's be honest, probably your cousin's sock drawer. Before you vanish into your blanket fort or start over-analysing your prom playlist, give this video a like and subscribe, but only if you enjoy your history spoon-fed with a little serotonin and synth. Huge thanks to the viewer who suggested this Valentine's special. We're honouring the season the only way we know how, with awkward hugs, suspicious beverages, and feelings that taste vaguely like orange Tic Tacs. Drop your favourite 80s, love song in the comments, or tell me what beverage you'd serve at a romantic rave for introverts. And as always, I love seeing where you're tuning in from, and which decade your throw pillows still think it is. Now, dim the lights, fire up a fan for that retro white noise, grab your coziest blanket, and let your worries dissolve faster than a sugar cube at an illegal warehouse rave. But let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how a drug originally designed for marriage counselling ended up as the unofficial sponsor of every sweaty, neon-lit dance floor in America? Was the hug life of the 80s really all group therapy and leg warmers? Or was it just a bunch of grown adults discovering they really like to talk about their feelings? Would you survive a night at a Dallas yuppie party? Or would you be the person desperately trying to explain to a stranger why vibes aren't a medical diagnosis? And honestly, was anyone in the 80s ever actually sober? Or was that just a rumour started by the Reagan administration? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1983, there's a fog machine running in the living room, someone's grandmother is handing out orange slices, and you're about to learn that therapy means something very different tonight. In a lab in 1912, a German chemist tried to make something completely boring, a blood-clotting agent of all things. Instead, he stumbled onto MDMA, a compound that would one day convince an entire generation that hugs were a medical necessity. This is the origin story you didn't know you needed. Let's set the scene. It's 1912, and the world's top pharmaceutical minds are locked in a frantic race to solve nosebleeds, apparently. Somewhere in a dim, tile-walled lab, Dr. Anton Kurlish is hunched over bubbling glassware, hoping to score points with his boss at Merck by inventing a medication that will do for clotting what duct tape did for plumbing. Spoiler, he never gets the patent. What he does get is a flask of pale, crystalline powder that the lab notes describe as methylzaphyramine, and history would later rebrand as the thing that makes you think the nightclub bathroom attendant is your soulmate. Nobody dances. Nobody glows. Nobody even realises the magnitude of what's sitting in the petri dish. Least of all Dr. Kullish, who's more concerned with chemical stability than inventing the soundtrack to the next century's best and worst dance moves. In fact, after a few bland, obligatory tests on rats, verdict, rats prefer cheese, MDMA is stuffed unceremoniously into the vault of compounds we made by accident, and might revisit if there's a global shortage of excitement. Imagine being so focused on inventing a blood coagulant that you overlook the birth of a drug that, given enough time and the right disco playlist, would eventually fuel an epidemic of group hugs. If you've ever missed an obvious solution to your problems, just know you are in excellent company. As the years tick by, MDMA's file gathers dust, squeezed between more practical inventions like aspirin, and the deep regret that nobody ever made a pill for sibling rivalry. Europe, meanwhile, barrels through 2 world wars, invents jazz, and collectively decides to ignore anything not immediately related to penicillin. For almost 70 years, the accidental love potion languishes in bureaucratic obscurity, its molecular arms folded, quietly judging. Fast forward to the 1950s, America is booming, Elvis is wriggling, and pharmaceutical companies are trawling old archives for anything remotely patentable. MDMA is fished out and briefly considered as a potential psychotherapeutic adjunct. Science speak for maybe this will make people less annoying at parties. But the interest is fleeting. A few cursory experiments suggest stimulant effects, but the real excitement seems to be reserved for tranquilizers that can turn a suburban housewife into a blissfully unaware Stepford mom. MDMA is shelved again, like a forgotten Christmas fruitcake, its destiny as an emotional amplifier postponed by the world's endless search for a cure for boredom. It isn't until the 1970s that fate and a very enthusiastic chemist finally intervene. But here, in its awkward, unloved infancy, MDMA is a chemical curiosity waiting for the right person, the right era, and the right collection of synthesizers to unlock its true potential. Just think, had that first Merck experiment gone differently, history's entire arc of therapy, rave culture, and questionable glow-stick choreography might have been replaced with something as mundane as a slightly improved Band-Aid. Instead, one misstep in a German laboratory set the stage for a century of experiments, misadventures, and a whole new era in the pursuit of human connection, accidentally, as all the best things in history tend to be. And so, before there were nightclubs, before there were anti-drug PSAs, before anyone ever asked, why do my hands feel like velvet, there was a bored chemist, an unintended invention, and the quiet, patient birth of the world's weirdest accidental love story. For almost 70 years, MDMA sat ignored in the back of a pharmaceutical filing cabinet, quietly plotting its disco-era comeback. While other drugs got famous, MDMA spent decades waiting for someone to finally read the fine print. Think of MDMA as the ultimate wallflower at the pharmacy prom. Aspirin is out there twirling with doctors. Penicillin has Nobel Prizes and groupies. Even cough syrup gets a starring role every flu season. Meanwhile, our poor little molecule is left sitting in the darkness, overlooked, unloved, and very much uninvited to the cool kids' table. Its most exciting adventure, occasionally being dusted off, only to be put right back on the shelf like a forgotten fruitcake, one that, by the way, would have made everyone far friendlier at holiday parties. The 1920s roll by, all jazz and speakeasies, and MDMA waits. The 1930s bring the Great Depression, but no one is depressed enough to think, hey, maybe we should see what's in this weird brown bottle labelled "for research only." Even as the world careens into World War and military doctors start rifling through every drawer for something, anything that might turn the tide, MDMA is consistently passed over in favour of things like morphine, amphetamines, or, actual strategies. Meanwhile, the 1940s and 50s are a golden age for pharmaceutical miracles. Valium, barbiturates, and tranquilizers are ushered in with parades and magazine spreads. There's a new drug for every occasion: work, play, house cleaning, or just surviving a family dinner. MDMA, however, is relegated to the deepest basement shelf, probably under a leaking pipe, next to a pile of broken Bunsen burners and a stack of unpaid parking tickets. Every once in a while, someone stumbles across the compound and shrugs. In the 1950s, the US Army briefly pokes at it, hoping it might double as a truth serum or a way to make spies even more emotionally vulnerable during interrogation. But the results are underwhelming, turns out. You can't extract state secrets from someone who's too busy telling you about their childhood dog and how much they love the wallpaper in your office. Back at Merck, the original pharmaceutical parent, scientists revisit MDMA now and then, like a bored relative remembering a weird uncle at Thanksgiving. But each time they crack the file open, they decide it's not commercially interesting. In big pharma terms, that's the equivalent of getting "let's just be friends" texted to you by every medical conference on the continent. So the decades shuffle on. MDMA, ever patient, watches as medicine invents antibiotics, steroids, and all manner of mind-altering potions. The 1960s arrive, a psychedelic buffet of chemical innovation, and even then, nobody bites. LSD and psilocybin get all the fame, tripping their way through the hearts and minds of a generation, while MDMA is left peering longingly through the beaded curtain of history, muttering, "I could have done that." It's not until the tail end of the 1970s that our forgotten molecule's fortunes finally start to shift. You can almost imagine MDMA in its little glass bottle, stretching after a 7-decade nap, squinting at the disco ball lights now peeking through the filing cabinet keyhole and thinking, wait, is it my turn? In a world suddenly obsessed with self-actualization, therapy, and new ways to wear spandex, MDMA's particular set of talents, generosity, empathy, and making strangers feel like lifelong friends are about to be discovered. All it takes is a rogue chemist, a little curiosity, and a willingness to ignore the do not consume label on experimental compounds. But for those 70 years, MDMA's biggest challenge wasn't legality or stigma. It was simple invisibility, sidelined by history, overlooked by science, and waiting for its moment to crash the party. And when that moment came, it wouldn't just slip quietly into the mainstream. No, MDMA was ready for the spotlight, eager to turn a forgotten legacy into the most unexpectedly affectionate revolution the world had ever seen. Alexander Shulgin, chemist, visionary and part-time mad scientist, saw MDMA's potential and decided to test it the only way scientists in the 70s could, by giving it to all his friends at a barbecue. His findings, remarkably pleasant. The FDA was less amused. To understand Dr. Shulgin, you have to picture the laboratory equivalent of a 1970s rock star. Wild hair, a wicked sense of humour, and a desk stacked so high with chemical flasks you'd half expect a rabbit in a waistcoat to pop out and offer you a cup of tea. This was a man who'd already made a name for himself in the world of chemistry, but instead of quietly retiring on a beach with a stack of crossword puzzles, he built a home lab, an actual honest-to-goodness shed in the backyard, and set about exploring the psychedelic frontier like Lewis and Clark, if Lewis and Clark had been more into beakers than boats. Shulgin's introduction to MDMA was pure serendipity, the sort of happy accident that seems to be a running theme in this story. After reading an obscure paper and tinkering with the molecule himself, he was struck by its promise. Here was a compound that didn't send people on wild hallucinations or leave them muttering about cosmic truths. Instead, it produced a gentle, clear-headed euphoria, and an urge to hug your neighbour, something that, frankly, the 70s already had plenty of, but never with such scientific precision. Now, most scientists might have started with a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. Shulgin, he did what any good host would do, invited his friends over for grilled chicken and experimental chemistry. Imagine being at that barbecue. You show up for potato salad and small talk, and leave believing that every houseplant in the backyard deeply understands you. It's science, but with more hugs and a slightly higher risk of someone confessing they still think about their third-grade spelling bee. Shulgin was meticulous, though. He kept detailed notes on every session, charted emotional effects, and even wrote about these subtle differences in experience if you ate the wrong brand of coleslaw beforehand. To him, these gatherings were as rigorous as any formal study, except with better music and the very real possibility of running out of chips halfway through a self-actualization breakthrough. His wife, Anne, quickly became his closest collaborator and the world's most patient research assistant. Together they tested MDMA with therapists, philosophers, and more than a few adventurous neighbours. Anne described the effects as opening the heart, and considering the era's fashion sense, it's a miracle no one tried that literally. The feedback was unanimous. Everyone felt warm, talkative, and deeply interested in discussing their relationship with their pet goldfish. Of course, word started to spread. Therapists, always eager for anything that made clients cry less and share more, began quietly using MDMA in counselling sessions. It was the emotional version of WD-40. Suddenly, even the stickiest marriage problems seemed to loosen up a bit. Secrets were shared, traumas explored, and group therapy became less about awkward silences and more about intense, heartfelt declarations of love, sometimes to the coffee table. Not everyone was thrilled. The FDA, never known for its sense of whimsy, was instantly suspicious of any drug whose primary side effect was feeling really, really nice. They began to eye Shulgin's operation the way a cat eyes an unattended glass of water. This was the beginning of a long, complicated love-hate relationship between MDMA and the establishment. Scientists, therapists, and Shulgin himself saw untapped potential. Regulators saw a future full of dancing, sweaty citizens and very confusing tax paperwork. But Dr. Shulgin pressed on, fueled by curiosity, passion, and an endless supply of lab coats that probably never passed a safety inspection. He didn't just unlock MDMA for the world, he opened a door to a new way of thinking about the brain, connection, and what it means to trust a chemist with barbecue tongs. And as the 1980s loomed, MDMA was about to go from backyard novelty to cultural phenomenon. All thanks to one man, his experiments, and a very brave circle of friends who just wanted a burger and left with a profound sense of unity. Therapists in the late 70s embraced MDMA like it was the answer to every marriage, midlife crisis, and existential dread. Sessions got so emotional, even the ferns in the corner felt moved. But it wouldn't stay clinical for long. Let's set the mood. It's 1977. You're slumped on a scratchy therapy sofa next to your equally anxious spouse, and your therapist is a gentle, bearded visionary with a sweater vest, and the kind of soothing voice that makes you want to spill every childhood secret by accident. But instead of the usual, how does that make you feel? Routine, you're handed a tiny pill, a glass of water, and told to be open to new experiences. 5 minutes later, you're gazing at your partner like you just met them at a silent meditation retreat, and suddenly realise they're not the reason you're mad at the toaster. For a brief shining window of history, MDMA becomes the secret source of the therapy world. Psychologists whisper about it at conferences with the kind of hush usually reserved for the best black market bagels. Couples who haven't hugged since the Carter administration are now holding hands, weeping, and remembering why they bought matching towels in the first place. Personal boundaries, blurry, emotional vulnerability, off the charts. And somewhere in the background, the office philodendron is thriving on all the positive energy, its leaves reaching toward the sun with the same enthusiasm as your recently revived relationship. But here's the twist. Therapy in the 70s isn't just about couples. There are group sessions, existential circles, and workshops with names like the Inner Journey and Radical Self-Acceptance through interpretive movement. MDMA sneaks into all of them. Suddenly sharing becomes oversharing, and nobody can remember why Gary from accounting was ever considered emotionally distant. He's currently holding hands with the whole office and narrating the tragic backstory of his pet turtle. Of course, the therapists keep notes. Detailed, exhaustive, slightly flowery notes. Subject expresses deep compassion for strangers. Session interrupted due to spontaneous group hug. Furniture arrangement rated highly conducive to emotional breakthrough. It all seems so scientific until someone tries to file a tax deduction for a beanbag chair labelled healing orb. Yet as word spreads, the line between therapeutic tool and party favour starts to blur faster than you can say, let's take this outside. Therapists are running out of tissues, and more importantly out of clients who still have secrets. Before long, those glowing reports of connection, empathy and spiritual renewal leak out of the office and into the real world, where people aren't interested in healing, just in feeling really, really good. This is where the story shifts from Dr. Rogers approved to Studio 54 after party. Imagine you're at a house party, and someone in an aggressively wide-collared shirt hands you an unmarked pill with a wink. Next thing you know, your inhibitions are gone, your playlist is only Bee Gees deep cuts, and you're hugging a complete stranger who's just explained the meaning of life as more glitter, less bitterness. MDMA has escaped the therapy couch and is headed for the dance floor, fueled by word of mouth, a cultural hunger for connection, and the general inability of the 1970s to keep a secret. It doesn't happen overnight. At first it's quiet, just a few therapists moonlighting as party consultants, and some curious clients who decide that processing emotions might pair nicely with disco lights and punch. But within a few years, the secret is out. Nightclubs that used to be full of moody wallflowers and suspiciously sticky floors are suddenly bursting with affection, laughter, and an unprecedented willingness to share last week's existential crisis with a DJ named Moonbeam. And just like that, MDMA's second act begins. Once the darling of the clinical world, it's now the life of the party. A transformation so dramatic, even the ferns back in the therapist's office are probably telling their friends about it. Welcome to the era where therapy doesn't end when you leave the couch. It just changes venues, and the only requirement is an open mind, comfortable shoes, and maybe, just maybe, a little extra glitter. Forget hippies. MDMA's early adopters were clean-cut professionals who wore suspenders by day and embraced open communication by night. Their investment portfolios? Pristine. Their serotonin receptors? Under siege. Welcome to the world of the psychedelic yuppie, where the only thing riskier than buying junk bonds in 1983 was admitting you'd never tried empathy in a capsule. Picture this. The downtown skyline is glowing, suits are freshly pressed, and after hours, a surprising number of briefcases are carrying something more interesting than quarterly earnings reports. Somewhere in the heart of Manhattan, a group of high-powered execs are gathered in a loft apartment decorated with glass block windows, potted ficuses, and an inexplicably large number of wind chimes. Unlike their counterculture predecessors, these yuppies don't want to drop out. They want to level up. And MDMA is the tool of choice. It's not about rebellion or sticking it to the man. It's about using every resource to optimize, synergize, and if possible cry in a way that feels both productive and on brand. Corporate retreats take on new meaning. Team building isn't just trust falls and awkward group bowling. Now it's trust circles and heartfelt confessions about how Chad from accounting reminds you of your childhood cat. The legendary status of MDMA among this crowd doesn't come from wild parties in abandoned warehouses. It comes from intimate gatherings after work, call them consciousness salons, because group therapy sounds too much like something you'd see on a daytime talk show. It's BYOB, bring your own breakthrough. Instead of cheap beer, there's imported wine and maybe some macrobiotic snacks, just to balance out the hedonism with a touch of virtue. Conversation, once limited to interest rates and which sushi place delivers fastest, transforms. Suddenly, Jeff from legal is talking about vulnerability. Sarah from HR is holding someone's hand, nobody's sure whose, and the office's most notorious workaholic is explaining at length why he loves sunsets and the soft fur on his golden retriever's ear. The group shares. The group bonds. At some point, someone probably attempts to write a mission statement for the human soul on a napkin. If you're imagining Wall Street excess, think again. The psychedelic yuppie scene is about introspection, personal growth, and leveraging the same drive that made them masters of the universe into becoming the best version of themselves. Sure, sometimes that means a passionate midnight group, sing along to Hall & Oates, but mostly it means putting as much effort into feeling feelings as they once put into closing deals. Still, old habits die hard. It's not unusual for someone to ask halfway through a particularly teary group hug if this newfound empathy is scalable or if there's a way to monetize authentic human connection. Others bring spreadsheets to the after party, just in case anyone wants to track personal growth against projected Q3 earnings, because nothing says vulnerability like a well-formatted pivot table. MDMA's ascent through this crowd doesn't stay secret for long. The word spreads, not through underground zines or hand-scrawled flyers, but through actual memos, water-cooler whispers, and the world's first unofficial HR-approved guide to feelings-forward networking. And unlike the hippies, who would have written poetry about this, yuppies analyse, optimise and host feedback sessions afterward. Of course, not everyone is sold. There are always skeptics. The boss who's never even tried a decaf. The junior associate convinced his soul will be audited by the IRS. The one guy who insists he already feels plenty and would rather talk about mutual funds. But even the doubters can't ignore the results. Offices get friendlier, meetings get warmer, and somewhere, a CEO is moved to tears by the company's new inspirational poster. In the end, the fusion of Wall Street ambition and Woodstock vibes is less a culture clash and more of a corporate merger. Yuppies, in their own buttoned-up analytic way, drag MDMA out of the counterculture shadows and into the fluorescent-lit boardrooms of the American dream. Their portfolios might be bulletproof, but now, thanks to a little chemical courage, their hearts are slightly more open too. Suddenly everyone is hugging, sharing, and staring deep into each other's eyes like they've just invented feelings. If you weren't expressing your childhood trauma to a total stranger in a nightclub bathroom, were you even alive in the 80s? Welcome to the Great American Empathy Boom, a time when the national pastime wasn't baseball or complaining about gas prices, but dissolving personal boundaries in a neon-lit blur of confessions and cuddles. Blame it on MDMA, or blame it on the era's general willingness to try anything once, including perms, which in hindsight were much more dangerous. Either way, the 80s became a petri dish for an emotional revolution, and nobody was immune. Picture this. You walk into a nightclub expecting the usual: shoulder pads, synth pop, and a suspicious puddle by the bathroom. But something is different. Instead of people brooding in corners or sizing up the competition, the dance floor is awash with grinning faces, open arms, and conversations that begin with, "How are you, really?" and end with both parties crying about their relationship with their fathers. This isn't a party. It's a group therapy session with a killer soundtrack. It's not just the clubs either. House parties, yoga studios, even corporate happy hours suddenly morph into emotional triage units. 1 minute, you're sipping a white wine spritzer. The next, you're telling Susan from marketing that you've never really felt seen, and she's holding your hand like you've just survived a natural disaster together. You barely know her last name, but you'd take a bullet for her before the night is over. And let's not forget the bathroom, a sacred space that, for one shining decade, was less about powdering your nose and more about having your soul lightly exfoliated by someone named Trevor, who is definitely not a licensed therapist. Strangers gather around the sinks, trading affirmations and apologies, sometimes for things that haven't even happened yet. There are lines for the stalls, but also for impromptu heart-to-hearts. If you're lucky, someone is distributing orange slices and heartfelt compliments with equal fervour. The phenomenon doesn't go unnoticed. Newspapers and morning talk shows start reporting on the hug craze, usually in tones of mild panic and thinly veiled jealousy. Suburban parents warn their teens about dangerous new drugs that make you love your neighbour, while secretly wondering if a little pharmaceutical vulnerability might not be such a bad thing for their next Tupperware party. For the first time in American history, being accused of having too many feelings becomes both a social risk and a badge of honour. But the hugs aren't just shallow gestures. Something deeper is happening. Long-standing grudges dissolve on sticky dance floors. Old friends reconcile over glow sticks. Couples who came for the music leave with a sense that maybe, just maybe, human connection is less about finding the perfect partner and more about realising you're just as weird and wonderful as everyone else in the room. Even the club DJs catch the vibe, peppering their sets with tracks guaranteed to spark spontaneous group swaying and soft collective sighs. Of course, it isn't all sunshine and serotonin. The sudden wave of honesty can get a little overwhelming. Not everyone is ready to have their emotional baggage hand-delivered by a stranger named Starflower. Some retreat to the edges, clutching their drinks and wondering when people stopped being embarrassed about crying in public. But resistance is mostly futile. By the end of the night, even the holdouts are nodding along to heartfelt declarations, or at the very least joining in for one last sweaty, slightly too long hug. This was the era when America, for a brief and beautiful moment, believed that love could be mass-produced, distributed, and shared with absolutely everyone. And maybe it wasn't sustainable, and maybe it was a little bit ridiculous. But for one unforgettable stretch of the 80s, empathy wasn't just a feeling, it was a movement. And if you left the club with glitter on your face and 3 new best friends, well, wasn't that kind of the point? Couples therapists are prescribing empathy in a pill. Sessions get weirder, marriages get either fixed or very, very awkward, and everybody starts wondering if love really is just a chemical imbalance. Imagine showing up for a typical couples counselling appointment in the late 70s. You're braced for the usual routine, tense silences, forced eye contact, maybe an assignment to write love letters you know will devolve into passive-aggressive shopping lists. But today is different. The therapist smiles, hands you and your spouse each a tiny tablet and says, Let's try something new. A few minutes later, instead of dissecting last week's argument about who left the wet towel on the bed, you're giggling, holding hands, and telling each other things you haven't said since your honeymoon, like I admire your courage, or I love the way you peel oranges, or even I'm sorry I used your toothbrush that time in 1974. For a brief and glorious window, marriage counselling becomes less about drudging up years of resentment and more about rediscovering why you actually liked each other in the first place. Therapists, previously armed only with tissue boxes and I feel statements, suddenly find themselves in the role of emotional traffic controller, gently guiding floods of affection, long-buried confessions, and the occasional declaration that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, besides nachos. The results are astonishing and unpredictable. Some couples rediscover the spark so intensely that they renew their vows before the next session. Others decide, mid-session, to break up, but with a level of mutual appreciation and understanding that has the therapist writing thank you notes to pharmaceutical companies. And every once in a while, a couple gets so wrapped up in their own feelings that they accidentally schedule a double date with the therapist's other clients. Therapy offices across America start to resemble improv theatres or group hug marathons. There are tissues everywhere, not just for tears, but for the spontaneous joy-induced nosebleeds that nobody warned you about. The office plants are thriving. Candles burn out faster than relationships on reality TV. Even the most sceptical spouses, the ones who came just for the free mints, find themselves opening up, if only to confess that they've never liked the family dog's name. But beneath the tidal wave of good vibes, questions start to bubble up. Is this real connection, or just a chemical shortcut? Did you really just forgive a decade of snoring, or is that the MDMA talking? Suddenly, it's not you. It's me gets replaced by it's not you. It's my serotonin levels. And somewhere, a scientist in a lab coat is furiously scribbling notes on the possibility of divorce-proofing America, one prescription at a time. The phenomenon spreads. Soon, group therapy sessions are filled with people declaring undying love for everyone in the circle, including the intern who was just trying to fix the thermostat. Couples who met at parties now want to process their feelings on the dance floor, resulting in heartfelt apologies delivered between the Macarena and Don't Stop Believin'. At-home therapy kits become a thing, marketed alongside fondue sets and self-help books, promising to transform your living room into a sacred space of healing, vulnerability, and potentially awkward oversharing. But for every fairy tale ending, there's a subplot worthy of a sitcom. Not every marriage can be rescued by a well-timed flood of serotonin. Sometimes, too much honesty leads to admissions about hidden shopping addictions, old crushes, or the mysterious case of the missing TV remote. Couples navigate a new world where love feels chemically possible, but still requires the ancient art of compromise, and occasionally a signed waiver. Looking back, the MDMA marriage miracle was both a revolution and a cautionary tale. It revealed that sometimes all we really need is to feel safe, seen, and a little less alone. But it also proved that, miracle or not, love is always messier than science. And that's a good thing, because if your relationship survived the era of empathy in a pill, you can probably handle anything, even another wet towel on the bed. A new kind of party explodes across the country, soft lighting, glitter everywhere, and a playlist that never leaves the top 40. The only dress code? Wear something you can sweat in and don't ask where the orange juice came from. It's 1984 and you've just paid $5 to stand in a line outside a windowless building that might have been a carpet showroom last week. The bouncer waves you in and you're instantly enveloped in a pastel-tinted world where everything shimmers. The lights, the floor, the faces of people who are hugging like it's both a competition and a public service. The air smells faintly of hairspray, sweat, and a mysterious citrus tang you can't quite place. Welcome to the first generation of MDMA nightclubs, where no one is sure what to expect, but everyone is sure they feel amazing. Inside, the usual nightclub rules have been flipped upside down. This isn't a place for scowling at strangers or pretending you enjoy watered-down vodka sodas. This is a temple to connection, built on the sacred pillars of dance, communal hydration, and an unspoken agreement that shoes are optional after 1 a.m. The DJ spins synth-heavy pop. The kind that sounds best when you're already 3 hugs deep, and even the most rhythm-challenged among us find their feet suddenly inspired to try new, questionable moves. No one judges. Tonight, even your dad's lawnmower dance would be greeted with applause. The fashion, too, is a phenomenon unto itself. Forget sequins and high heels. Here it's all about comfort and sweat-wicking technology. Baggy shirts, neon headbands, shorts with suspicious stains from previous nights of peak experience. Accessories are less about status, more about utility. Water bottles clipped to fanny packs, fans for cooling off, and of course, the omnipresent orange slice, handed to you with the reverence of a sacred relic by a stranger who claims their name is Stardust. If you ask for details, they'll just pat your shoulder and murmur, "You'll understand soon." You make your way to the bar, where the drink menu is oddly wholesome. Juice, water, and the occasional cup of herbal tea. Someone's grandmother is working the counter, passing out fluids and sage advice about pacing yourself. Hydration is everything, darling. There's a rumour she once outdanced an entire basketball team at Studio 54, but tonight she's more interested in making sure no one dehydrates before sunrise. In the corner, a chill-out room beckons, a dimly lit sanctuary filled with beanbags, lava lamps, and the low hum of soft-spoken revelations. Here, people decompress from the sensory overload, discussing life, love, and the exact texture of the ceiling with a depth normally reserved for existential philosophers. One guy is gently petting a disco ball. Another has been staring at the same glowing stick for 40 minutes, convinced he's discovered the secret to happiness. He's not entirely wrong. Everywhere, strangers become friends in record time. Compliments flow as freely as the water. "I love your shirt. You have the best laugh. Do you want to talk about your deepest hopes and dreams? In any other decade, this would get you a restraining order. In the MDMA nightclub, it gets you a dance partner for the next 3 hours and an invitation to brunch tomorrow. The sense of collective joy is so intense it's almost eerie. People dance in clusters, arms draped around shoulders, faces shining. If someone stumbles, 10 hands reach out to steady them. If a song ends, there's a group sigh, followed by enthusiastic cheers when the next synth line kicks in. Nobody wants the night to end. Nobody cares what time it is, only that the moment is perfect and that somewhere there's more orange juice. As dawn approaches, the party finally winds down. Glitter clings to your skin. Your legs ache in the best possible way. You leave with pockets full of new phone numbers and enough compliments to last the rest of your life. For a brief window in history, the world felt like one big, beautiful neon dream. A dance floor where everyone belonged. Eventually, the authorities notice that people are a little too happy for no good reason. Enter the DEA, armed with clipboards, suspiciously tight ties, and a deep mistrust of anyone who's smiled in the last hour. If there's one thing guaranteed to rouse government suspicion, it's a large group of adults expressing joy in public. When word starts spreading that America's dance floors have become hotbeds of emotional honesty, the DEA springs into action. Their first clue? Reports that nightclub lost and founds are overflowing with friendship bracelets, thank you notes, and an alarming number of heartfelt mixtapes. For years, MDMA slipped quietly beneath the radar, camouflaged as a therapeutic aid and the world's most affectionate party favour. But you can only have so many people hugging bouncers and confessing their admiration for parking lot attendants before someone in Washington gets nervous. By 1985, there are congressional hearings, nervous TV anchors, and at least one senator making the grave announcement that America is in the grip of a hug epidemic. The DEA, trained to spot danger lurking behind every disco ball, launches Operation Love Potion, a sweeping investigation into why citizens of all ages have developed sudden, intense opinions about the beauty of velvet and the meaning of friendship. Agents go undercover at nightclubs, armed with notepads and deep skepticism, trying to blend in among people who are much too happy to see them. It goes about as well as you'd expect. Nothing says narc like someone asking for just tap water, thanks, while scribbling suspiciously every time a group hug breaks out. Their mission is further complicated by the peculiar side effects of MDMA culture. Every time an agent tries to interrogate a suspect, they're met with an unsolicited therapy session and a hug. One rookie agent, tasked with gathering evidence, ends up with a new pen pal, a friendship bracelet, and a sudden sense of closure about his childhood pet hamster. Not the result they'd planned, but undeniably therapeutic. Of course, this new wave of positivity doesn't go unchallenged. The media latches on, running breathless exposés on ecstasy parties and empathy rings. Concerned parents start noticing that their teenagers have become unusually chatty at dinner, and Congress, never one to miss a crisis, begins drafting laws with names like the Anti-Love Potion Act. Talk shows debate the moral hazards of loving thy neighbour, while conveniently ignoring the fact that half their guests are still riding the afterglow of last Saturday's warehouse party. Behind the scenes, scientists and therapists plead their case. MDMA, they argue, isn't some cartoon supervillain drug. It's a tool for healing, a shortcut to self-acceptance, and, let's be honest, a way to finally get Phil from accounting to open up about his feelings. But the tide has turned. To the powers that be, there's no such thing as too much happiness unless it can be taxed or regulated, and neither is on the table yet. The crackdown begins. Raids sweep through nightclubs from Miami to San Francisco. Bottles of orange juice are confiscated as potential evidence. Flyers with rainbows and smiley faces are held up in court as proof that society is spiralling out of control. The term designer drug enters the national vocabulary, and for the first time in history, Americans are warned that expressing empathy may lead to legal trouble. But if history has taught us anything, it's that good vibes are surprisingly hard to regulate. The more the DEA pushes back, the more inventive the party scene becomes. Password-protected raves pop up in abandoned factories, therapy circles go underground, and somewhere, a group of suburban moms is meeting in secret to discuss the finer points of rolling safely. In the end, Operation Love Potion does what all government crackdowns do. It drives the scene deeper, makes the stories wilder, and leaves behind enough paperwork to wallpaper Studio 54. MDMA is now officially public enemy number 1, at least until the next moral panic comes along. And the hugs? Well, they just go underground too, because you can outlaw the pill, but good luck banning joy. Nothing says America quite like criminalizing human connection. Congress outlaws MDMA, launching the official war on fun. Therapists protest, ravers panic, and somewhere, Nancy Reagan is deeply, deeply confused. It's the mid-80s, and the country is bracing itself for yet another moral crusade. Forget nuclear threats and aerobics injuries. The real enemy is now empathy. Washington is in a legislative tizzy, holding urgent hearings where the main evidence is a stack of friendship bracelets and some very, very moist hugs. The nation's lawmakers gather in their most serious ties, determined to protect the youth of America from the perils of honest conversation and the occasional unplanned group cry. The logic is as follows. If teenagers are staying out late and coming home with a suspicious new appreciation for humanity, then something must be done. Thus begins a campaign so American it should have been accompanied by a marching band and free hot dogs. MDMA is classified as a Schedule I substance, right up there with heroin, except, instead of robbing liquor stores, the average user is robbing you of your personal space, and possibly your last stick of gum. Therapists who had spent years quietly pioneering empathy-assisted breakthroughs are suddenly outlaws in cardigans. The same pill that once saved marriages is now the target of SWAT teams. Underground, support groups are forming with the urgency of a spy network. Instead of code names and secret knocks, their main tools are hugs, eye contact, and an encyclopedic knowledge of Phil Collins' greatest hits. Someone is definitely making a mixtape titled Ballads for the Band. Meanwhile, ravers everywhere are in full panic mode. Nightclubs once known for being the friendliest places in town turn tense and whispery. Rumours swirl. Is your favourite DJ an informant? Are those orange slices bugged? Will the next bathroom attendant be wearing a wire? The scene goes from peace, love, unity, respect to paranoia, lockjaw, untagged coat check tickets. Dance floors empty at the first hint of a raid, and somewhere in the haze someone is giving a rousing speech about civil liberties that nobody can hear over the synthesizer. Parents, who a month ago were worried about Dungeons and Dragons and microwaves, are now frantically searching their children's rooms for anything that could double as paraphernalia, glow sticks, water bottles, even an overly friendly note from Grandma. Meanwhile, Nancy Reagan is spotted at a press conference, holding a smile so tight it might qualify as a new form of abstinence. Her Just Say No campaign suddenly includes footnotes about cuddling and excessive eye contact. Of course, as with every war on something, the crackdown produces as much comedy as it does drama. In cities across America, clubs try to go hug-free by introducing new policies: a strict ban on group embraces, mandatory anti-hugging instructional videos, and, for one glorious week, the world's first attempt at emotionless dancing, which, tragically, looks a lot like every high school slow dance before 1992. Meanwhile, the black market for MDMA booms. Street names multiply: Ecstasy, X, Adam, the hug drug, disco biscuits, each one more absurd than the last, like rejected menu items at a chain restaurant. Dealers get creative, disguising pills as vitamins, candies, or the least appetizing thing of all: generic allergy medication. Somewhere a pharmacist is quietly weeping. But despite the best efforts of Congress, the church, and every guidance counselor with a moustache, the spirit of the 80s hug refuses to die. Therapy moves underground, raves retreat to secret warehouses, and, against all odds, Americans keep hugging, sometimes out of protest, sometimes out of habit, and sometimes because at the end of the day it just feels good. So, while the war on ecstasy is waged with all the subtlety of a marching band in a library, history will remember it for what it was: a nation's deeply earnest attempt to legislate away the awkward, messy, miraculous act of being human together. And, as always, the only thing that really got banned was common sense. Illicit labs crank into overdrive, churning out pills in every shape imaginable, from smiley faces to little doves. If you ever wondered who made your disco biscuit, chances are they failed high school chemistry and learned the rest from a zine. With MDMA banned faster than you could say group hug, America's supply chain for empathy rerouted itself to some very questionable locations. Gone were the days of clinical purity and therapy-adjacent respectability. Now, the journey from raw chemical to nightclub bathroom stall would make even the most jaded logistics manager weep. The new manufacturing elite, an army of tinkerers, dropouts, and ambitious hobbyists who considered lab safety a polite suggestion, and good manufacturing practices a bedtime story for squares. The early underground chemists were a colourful cast. Some were counterculture veterans with names like Sunbeam or Cosmic Dave, always ready to explain the spiritual significance of their bathtub. Others were suburban teens with a chemistry set, a pirated copy of the anarchist cookbook, and an unshakable faith in the power of duct tape. The only real requirement: a garage, a blender that could be sacrificed for the cause, and a total willingness to risk everything for the greater good, namely better dancing and more interesting pillow talk. These clandestine labs were about as far from Breaking Bad as you could get. Picture a mouldy basement, racks of unlabelled bottles, and a handwritten "Don't Tell Mum" sign on the door. There's always one guy with thick glasses who insists on measuring everything in pinches, and another who's convinced that the secret to a perfect batch is positive thinking and the right moon phase. Quality control? Let's just say, sometimes you got a smiley face pill that made you feel like hugging the universe, and sometimes you just felt like calling your ex to apologise for things you hadn't even done yet. The recipes themselves spread through an underground grapevine, hand-copied notes, zines stapled in coffee shops, or coded instructions posted to proto-internet message boards where every user was either an aspiring chemist or someone with an unfiltered modem and too much time on their hands. Add 2 parts this, 1 part that, swirl until it looks like lemonade, and whatever you do, don't light a match. For every successful batch, there were a dozen spectacular failures. Batches that fizzed, smoked, exploded, or, in one legendary case, accidentally produced a mildly hallucinogenic cleaning product that sold surprisingly well for 3 weeks. Distribution followed the classic American model: entrepreneurial, chaotic, and occasionally brilliant. Suitcases full of candy-coloured pills crossed state lines hidden under car seats, in the false bottoms of boom boxes, or lovingly stitched into the lining of parachute pants. College students became accidental kingpins, their dorm rooms serving as both sales office and R&D lab. Some brands took off: blue dolphins, green shamrocks, white Mitsubishis, each with its own reputation, and, if you were lucky, at least some of the advertised ingredients. With the authorities in hot pursuit, underground chemists became folk heroes, spoken of with the same reverence once reserved for Robin Hood or the guy who invented pizza delivery. Stories abounded: batches cooked on Christmas Eve, deals done in abandoned bowling alleys, recipes traded for hugs and mixtapes. Law enforcement, desperate to keep up, devoted entire teams to decoding pill designs and interrogating ravers whose only crime was an excess of positivity and a suspiciously large water bill. But as with all bootleg industries, the dark side was never far away. Unlabeled pills led to a handful of tragic mishaps, and the lack of standards meant the spectrum of experiences ran from transcendent to "why is my tongue blue and do you smell toast?" Nevertheless, the party continued, fueled by ingenuity, recklessness, and the unshakable belief that feeling good was worth the risk. So the next time you hear about a little tablet changing hands in a dimly lit club, remember, it was born in the Wild West of American chemistry, somewhere between a dream and a disaster, all for the love of a dance floor hug. MDMA finds its true home in the sweaty arms of rave culture. Warehouse parties erupt in a blaze of glow sticks, bucket hats, and dance moves that have never, ever been legal in the state of Texas. It's the late 80s and early 90s, and somewhere on the edge of town, usually behind a strip mall under a bridge, or in an abandoned factory that may or may not still contain haunted forklifts, a crowd gathers. They look like a lost parade from a parallel universe: neon visors, baggy pants, t-shirts with holographic dolphins, and backpacks decorated with so many stuffed animals you'd think the party was sponsored by Build-A-Bear. If you're not wearing at least 2 colours visible from space, are you even at a rave? Inside, the transformation is total. Flickering strobe lights and black lights illuminate a concrete jungle packed wall to wall with bodies. The air is thick with the scent of sweat, candy, and just a hint of industrial cleaner, because nothing says spiritual awakening like dancing 3 feet away from a pile of unused floor tiles. And somewhere in the background, a subwoofer is thumping out a relentless beat that makes your ribcage feel like a percussion instrument in a marching band led by an octopus on caffeine. This is where MDMA truly shines. On these dance floors, personal boundaries are vaporized. Strangers lock eyes, grin, and start dancing in perfect, chaotic unison. Someone hands you a glow stick, no explanation necessary, and suddenly you're part of a choreographed wave of light, waving and twirling with the same earnestness as an Olympic torch relay, if the torch relay ended with a 3-hour group hug. It's not just about the music, although the music is relentless. DJs become high priests of rhythm, guiding their flock through peaks, valleys, and sudden moments of existential realization set to the sound of a remix nobody can remember the name of. Every drop is a revelation. Every whistle blast is an invitation to shout your hopes and dreams into the void, which, on most nights, is just the space between 2 giant speakers. Fashion reaches new heights of chaos. Picture platform sneakers, plastic jewellery, and mesh tops that raise more questions than they answer. Bucket hats are worn with a level of sincerity unseen since the heyday of fishing. The only unspoken rule: wear what makes you happy, and what won't get stuck in an escalator on your way out. People swap beaded bracelets, candy, each one a token of a new friendship forged in the crucible of bass and blinking LED rings. And somewhere, someone is always wearing sunglasses indoors, because rave logic. There's an odd, beautiful purity to it all. No VP sections, no velvet ropes, just a democracy of dance. If you want to feel special, you hand out a glow necklace, or give someone a pep talk in the chill-out zone. And for every epic light show, there's a heartfelt conversation happening on a pile of old pallets, with participants discussing everything from the meaning of life to whether fruit snacks count as dinner. Of course, every scene has its characters. The space cadet who's convinced he can hear colours, the hydration enthusiast with a backpack full of Capri Sun pouches, the shy dancer who, 2 hours in, is leading the world's least coordinated conga line. Even the skeptics, those who show up just to check it out, find themselves swept up in the tidal wave of positivity, or at least surrendering to the urge to wear 3 bandanas at once. And at the centre of it all is MDMA, turning the volume up on love, light and connection. For one night, in one sweat-soaked warehouse, all the loneliness and awkwardness of the world evaporates in a cloud of glitter and thumping bass. Everyone belongs. The outside world, with its rules, worries and normal pants, will still be there in the morning, but for now. The night is young, the music is loud, and the fashion is so bad it's absolutely perfect. Why does everything suddenly feel soft? Why do glow sticks seem like the world's greatest invention? MDMA heightens every sense, sometimes too much, especially if you're within 5 feet of a smoke machine. Welcome to the part of the party where reality melts like a candle under a disco ball. The second MDMA kicks in, your brain's internal volume knob gets cranked so high, even a passing compliment feels like a warm bath, and every bass line seems to be playing directly on your soul. If you thought socks fresh out of the dryer were cozy, wait until you run your hands over a faux fur vest while rhythm as a dancer shakes the walls. Suddenly the carpet under your shoes feels like clouds. The wall is not just a wall, it's an interactive art experience, especially if it's covered in that fuzzy flocked wallpaper your grandma used to like. Glow sticks become the holy grail of entertainment. You don't just wave them, you study them, you contemplate them, you invent elaborate mystical backstories for them. Their colours bend, twist and swirl in the dark, leaving trails of light that seem to spell out the secrets of the universe if you squint hard enough. The more you look, the more you're convinced that Thomas Edison's greatest contribution to humanity was actually the chemical reaction inside these $1.99 plastic tubes. Let's talk music. It isn't just music anymore, it's a full-body experience. Every snare drum feels like a tiny cosmic event. The vocals in Don't You Want Me become so moving that you have to pause mid-dance to tell someone you hope their childhood dreams came true. The DJ's laser show? It's a portal to another dimension, and you're pretty sure you can see into the next county if you stare just long enough at the strobe lights. But it isn't just sight and sound, touch is off the charts. Fuzzy hats, plush toys, mesh shirts, the condensation on your water bottle. Everything is a textural marvel. Hugs aren't just comforting, they're Olympic-level emotional experiences. That handshake you just received, it will haunt your heart for years. Even standing in front of an industrial fan feels like you've just discovered what it truly means to be alive. Smells, of course, become their own adventure. The sharp scent of orange peels in the air is like the world's happiest alarm clock. The waft of someone's cherry lip balm is a life-affirming event. And then there's the less celebrated aromas, like the cloud from the fog machine, which hovers between mysterious woodland and did someone burn a pile of glow sticks in here? For some, it's magic. For others, it's a reminder that you probably shouldn't inhale everything that glitters. Even taste is a voyage. Water is suddenly the most delicious beverage ever invented. Every sip is a miniature waterfall, and you'll never take hydration for granted again. If you're lucky enough to score an orange slice, it's like eating sunshine, hope, and childhood innocence, all at once. Gummy bears, popsicles, and gum are passed around like rare artifacts. Nobody cares if they're sugar-free or vegan. The point is to taste as many textures as possible before sunrise. And then, occasionally, it's all just a bit too much. The music crescendos, the strobe lights double down. The guy next to you is wearing a poncho made of bubble wrap and won't stop talking about the interconnectedness of all breakfast cereals. Your brain waves the white flag. You shuffle off to the chill-out zone, collapsing onto a beanbag chair where the world softens, the lights dim, and you spend the next 30 minutes running your fingers through your own hair, certain you've reached nirvana. This, then, is the core of rave culture's sensory overload. A wild, heartfelt, sometimes hilarious testament to the joy of being present in your body, your friendships, and your favourite synthetic fabric. For a few wild hours, nothing exists but colour, sound, and the world's greatest glow stick, and that truly is a sensation worth remembering. From impromptu group hugs with strangers to sharing life stories with the bathroom attendant, MDMA turns ordinary people into open books, usually books with missing pages and questionable endings. Suddenly your internal filter, the one that used to help you discern which thoughts should stay on the inside, packs up and goes on vacation. On MDMA, you become the world's most enthusiastic oversharer. You don't just compliment someone's shirt. You praise the existential courage it takes to wear paisley in public. You're not just dancing. You're performing an interpretive retelling of every heartbreak you've ever experienced, live, for an audience of two very confused but supportive clubgoers named Jen and Goose. Every conversation feels urgent, profound, and possibly life-altering. That bartender who's been pouring soda water all night. By midnight, you're discussing the meaning of existence and making plans to open a vegan food truck together in Santa Fe. You're suddenly convinced that you have an undiscovered psychic ability, usually involving reading auras or guessing people's favourite colour based on the sound of their laugh. In the moment, it all feels totally reasonable. You are Socrates, or at least Socrates on roller skates. The classic MDMA night is a minefield of hilariously poor decisions, each one fueled by an absolute certainty that this is the right thing to do. You find yourself telling your deepest secrets to the line for the unisex bathroom. The person in the stall next to you is now your emotional support animal. You agree to swap friendship bracelets, life stories, and probably a social security number or two. Your phone's contact list the next morning will read like a casting call for a very experimental reality show. Tony, guy from Coat Check, who knows origami, Lisa, shared gum and tears, and DJ Perfect said he'd change my life, possibly a cat. And then there are the hugs. MDMA doesn't just lower boundaries, it demolishes them, paves over the ruins, and throws a potluck where everyone brings their weirdest emotional baggage. Group hugs erupt spontaneously, pulling in everyone within a 5-foot radius. Friends, exes of friends, the janitor, and a houseplant named Steve. There's no such thing as awkwardness, only processing energy. At least one person will give a tearful speech about universal love, and everyone will agree, except the one guy in the corner still coming to terms with the power of citrus fruits. It's not just limited to touchy-feely moments either. The bad decision-making gets more creative as the night wears on. You will try on someone else's clothes. You will make bold declarations about your plans to quit your job and start a communal living arrangement with everyone you met tonight. You might even sign up for a sunrise yoga class, even though you've never willingly stretched before noon. Food choices also go off the rails. Someone hands you a pickle at 2 a.m, and you react as if you've tasted the nectar of the gods. An offer of cold pizza from a total stranger sparks a tearful gratitude spiral and a philosophical debate about toppings. Later, you'll be convinced to drink water with electrolytes because it tastes like electricity and hope. Spoiler, it just tastes like salt. Of course, in the grand tradition of questionable decisions, you promise to keep in touch with every new friend you've made. You will not. But for a brief, sparkling window, your judgment is gloriously impaired. Your optimism is sky high, and your sense of risk is set to what's the worst that could happen. The art of bad decision-making then is less about disaster, and more about discovering just how much fun it is to let go, let loose, and learn that sometimes a night of mild regret is worth every glittery, affectionate, ill-advised moment. Drink water, they said. Eat oranges, they said. Nobody explains why, but suddenly every club bathroom is an unofficial hydration checkpoint patrolled by someone named Skylar. Let's set the scene. It's 2:45 a.m. in a warehouse somewhere between technically abandoned and definitely condemned. You stumble into the restroom, expecting to find the usual suspects, hazy mirrors, faintly alarming graffiti, and a soap dispenser that works only on alternate Tuesdays. Instead, you're greeted by a bustling scene that resembles an Olympic event for people with glow sticks. Skylar, with a whistle and an armful of mini water bottles, is orchestrating hydration like a benevolent cult leader. You're not permitted to leave until you've downed a Dixie cup of water, and been offered at least 2 orange slices and a motivational pep talk. This is no ordinary party. This is the era of the Great Hydration Crisis, when everyone you meet is suddenly a self-appointed expert on water retention and the nutritional properties of citrus fruit. Did you know that electrolytes are the secret to happiness? Neither did Skylar until about 15 minutes ago. Now, it's the only thing anyone talks about between dance breaks. Some claim water prevents serotonin crashes. Others insist the vitamin C in oranges is what makes the lights look so sparkly. Science? Who cares? Just keep drinking. The origins of this obsession are shrouded in myth. One person heard about someone who once, in a land far, far away, fainted after dancing too hard. Someone else swears their cousin's best friend's roommate was saved from certain doom by chugging a bottle of Gatorade. These stories swirl around the club, gaining new details with every retelling, until they become as central to rave culture as the music itself. Soon, every dance floor develops its own oral tradition. Did you hear about the guy who drank only water all night and achieved enlightenment? What about the girl who refused orange slices and turned invisible under the blacklight? Urban legends take on a life of their own, making every bottle of water feel like an elixir and every orange slice a magic charm. The rules are never written down, but everyone knows them. Never turn down free fruit, never refuse water from Skylar, and always, always pee before getting back in line. This hydration hysteria leads to some memorable moments. Dance circles grind to a halt as people cluster around a single bottle of smart water, passing it like the world's most precious artifact. A stranger offers you a juice box, and you accept it with the solemnity of a marriage proposal. The communal bathroom sink is a sacred space, where alliances are forged, secrets are shared, and someone always tries, unsuccessfully, to wash glitter out of their hair. Some clubs catch on and capitalize, installing hydration stations stocked with cups, fruit, and motivational signs. Sip before you trip. Stay juicy. Others just let Skylar do their thing after all. Who's going to argue with someone in a bucket hat and a hydration backpack, especially when they know your zodiac sign by heart? Of course, for every hydration hero, there's someone who misses the memo. They're easy to spot. Glazed eyes, dance moves growing sluggish, a haunted look when someone mentions potassium. The veterans swarm to their aid, offering orange slices, water, and unsolicited stories about the dangers of dehydration. And just when you think you can't possibly drink another drop, someone hands you a popsicle and insists it's for your energy flow. By the end of the night, your skin glows, your pee is clear, and you're pretty sure you've consumed your body weight in fruit salad. You may not know the scientific truth behind it all, but you do know this. The rave goes on, fueled by music connection and the collective power of hundreds of slightly damp vitamin C-infused partiers. And as the sun rises, Skylar finally hangs up their whistle, content in the knowledge that for one more night, nobody went thirsty and the legend of hydration lives on. By 1987, every city has at least one guy who knows a chemist. Spoiler, it's always a cousin, never an actual chemist. But suddenly, everyone is offering unsolicited advice on rolling safely. You might expect the sudden explosion of amateur pharmacology to feel reassuring. After all, who wouldn't want a personal wellness consultant at every party? In reality, it's more like living in a world where everyone has just finished watching half of a medical documentary and is now convinced they're qualified to run a hospital, or at the very least, a moderately successful apothecary out of the trunk of their car. Welcome to the golden age of rave science, where credentials are optional and confidence is key. No matter where you go, there's always at least one person eager to explain the science of safe rolling. They'll corner you near the DJ booth or next to a strobing lava lamp, speaking in low, urgent tones about hydration schedules, vitamin stacks, and the correct order in which to eat gummy bears for optimal serotonin uptake. Does any of this information check out? Not even remotely. But everyone nods along, because when someone is waving a bag of jelly beans and quoting Reader's Digest, who are you to argue? The advice comes in waves. Take magnesium, it stops jaw clenching. Don't eat bananas after midnight. Chew gum, but only if it's peppermint. If you feel weird, just listen to Phil Collins and ride it out. For every tip that's vaguely rooted in reality, there are 10 that were probably invented by a guy named Kevin after his third Red Bull. Suddenly, party prep involves not just picking out your brightest bucket hat, but also a trip to the vitamin aisle and a long, confusing phone call with someone's older brother. Of course, nobody agrees on anything. In one corner, a cluster of self-proclaimed experts is debating whether coconut water or sports drinks are the key to the perfect roll. Meanwhile, across the room, another group insists that pre-party stretching prevents negative vibes and guarantees your aura stays crisp. The only thing everyone agrees on: under no circumstances should you accept advice from Chad, whose track record includes accidentally snorting Tang and starting a short-lived rumour that orange Tic Tacs counteract come-downs. Then there's the pill testers, those intrepid souls who have somehow acquired a chemistry set and now fancy themselves one beaker away from a Nobel Prize. Every party has a legend about someone testing a pill by dropping it in Coca-Cola, holding it up to the light and declaring, "Yep, that's pure empathy." They set up shop on kitchen counters and in parking lots, armed with reagent kits and a penchant for dramatic flair. If you're lucky, you might get an actual answer. More often, you just get a colour that looks fine and a shrug. No conversation about rave experts would be complete without the ultimate urban legend, the cousin who knows a guy in pharmaceuticals. You hear about him constantly but never see him. He's always just left or can't make it tonight. He's the Banksy of harm reduction, leaving behind cryptic dosage charts and questionable wisdom. Never mix yellow pills with techno music after 3 a.m. Supposedly he's writing a book, but for all the confusion, there's a certain beauty in the chaos. People genuinely care. They want to help you avoid a rough night and have the best possible time, even if their expertise comes from a 1985 copy of Popular Science and a mixtape called Chill Vibes for Acid Rain. At its heart, this patchwork pharmacology is just one more way the rave scene looked out for its own. So next time you're cornered by someone with wild eyes, a fanny pack and a theory about electrolytes, just remember, they mean well. And while their cousin may never show up, the advice, like everything else in rave culture, is given freely, received warmly, and, with any luck, quickly forgotten by sunrise. What goes up must come down. After a night of synthetic bliss, Monday mornings hit hard. The only thing more devastating than your serotonin crash: realizing you left your jacket in a nightclub named after a Greek myth. It's the next day, and you're no longer king of the dance floor, you're the mayor of Regret City. The birds sound too loud, the sun feels like it's judging you, and you're pretty sure your pillow spent the night plotting against you. Welcome to the day after, a time when even the world's most optimistic raver questions every life choice that led them here, starting with, "Did I really tell a bouncer my astrological chart?" and ending with, "Who invented Mondays, and can I sue?" Physically, you're horizontal. You might make it vertical by noon, but only if the promise of leftover pizza is strong enough. Your brain, which last night was inventing new genres of poetry and spiritual connection, is now operating on dial-up speed. You remember hugging a stranger named Cosmic Steve and crying over the beauty of fluorescent lighting, but beyond that, everything's a gentle, hazy blur. You check your phone, but you're not ready to face that many notifications from people saved as Glowstick Janet and DJ Buttercup. Then there's the serotonin hangover, the invisible tax on all that euphoria. It's not just a regular hangover, it's a full-scale neurological reckoning. You're tired, achy, and inexplicably sentimental about cartoons you haven't watched since 1993. The smallest thing, a certain song, the glint of glitter on your bedsheet, triggers a wave of nostalgia that could flatten a lesser mortal. You contemplate writing a novel about your feelings, but first you need another nap and possibly an entire watermelon. Breakfast is ambitious. Coffee tastes like disappointment, orange juice is suspiciously reminiscent of last night's hydration crisis, and if someone offers you an energy drink, you'll start weeping. Your body, formerly a temple, is now a fixer-upper. Your brain cycles between three thoughts. Was it worth it? Why do I feel like I've been tumble-dried? And seriously, where is my jacket? But the real fun is emotional whiplash. Last night you had profound, heartfelt conversations with new friends who, for all you know, could have been holograms. Today, You question every life choice you ever made, including your decision to hug an entire conga line and share your childhood dreams with the bartender. You scroll through your texts and find evidence of your wisdom, including messages like, "Let's start a commune for emotionally available people only, and I'm naming my next cat after you." There's also a photo of you crying into a slice of pizza. It's unclear whether the pizza was involved. Work? Don't even try. You're physically present, but spiritually you're still in the club, clutching a glow stick and whispering, "Plur, peace, love, unity, respect," to your inbox. Your boss asks about your weekend, and you respond with a 1,000-yard stare and a single cryptic smile. Productivity is at an all-time low. You spend 30 minutes pondering the existential significance of spreadsheets, then another 30 Googling how to restore serotonin with minimal effort. But here's the secret. As the day wears on, the world softens. You drink water. You eat your body weight in carbs. The jacket remains missing, but you slowly remember why you went out in the first place. To feel, to connect, to dance away the edges of the mundane. The serotonin may be slow to return, but the memories of laughter, music, and the brief, shining miracle of true connection linger long after the glitter fades. And, with any luck, you'll get your jacket back at Lost and Found next Friday. If not, there's always next weekend's party and maybe, just maybe, a little more moderation, or at least a backup sweater. By the late 80s, MDMA has its day in court. Lawyers argue, scientists squabble, and politicians attempt to pronounce methylenedioxymethamphetamine with a straight face. Welcome to the courtroom, a fluorescent-lit theatre of the absurd, where the stakes are high, the evidence is sticky with glitter, and the judge looks like he hasn't smiled since the Ford administration. The great debate isn't about property or politics, it's about whether America's favourite hug drug is a public health menace, a misunderstood miracle, or just a very complicated tongue twister. On one side, you have government prosecutors armed with charts, dire warnings, and enough frowns to power a small village. They point to the headlines: empathy overdose, teens hugging in record numbers. They present evidence that reads like a PTA newsletter: glow sticks, candy bracelets, water bottles, and a suspiciously cheerful mixtape labelled Plur Anthems. They warn of a country teetering on the edge of chaos, where nobody locks their doors and everyone leaves the club with an emotional support group. On the other side, the defence scrambles to reframe the narrative. Enter the scientists, some with decades of credentials, others with decades of experience at Burning Man, explaining, in painfully technical terms, how MDMA modulates neurotransmitter release and fosters pro-social behaviour. The jury looks confused. The judge scribbles a note that may or may not say order pizza. The word methylenedioxymethamphetamine is repeated so often that, by lunchtime, it sounds like a lost track from Kraftwerk. Therapists take the stand to share their heartfelt tales. Marriages salvaged, traumas processed, grudges dropped on the altar of empathy. There are moving testimonials from former clients, now happily married, crediting MDMA, assisted therapy, for their ability to forgive everything from infidelity to the crime of eating the last donut. Somewhere in the gallery, Nancy Reagan is seen clutching her pearls and muttering, "Just say no to feelings, the circus is in full swing." Expert witnesses are grilled about serotonin, rat studies, and why humans feel the need to touch everything in sight after taking Adam. At one point, a senator tries to ask a question but gets lost in the pronunciation of enantiomer, which everyone agrees is probably not a dance move. A forensic toxicologist spends an hour explaining the difference between pure MDMA and the neon confetti masquerading as ecstasy in the wild. The courtroom bailiff is caught humming "Don't You Want Me?", a fact entered into the record without objection. Meanwhile, the press has a field day. Headlines blare, "Is MDMA the new marriage counsellor?" And lawmakers debate the hug epidemic. Daytime TV hosts run polls. Should Congress regulate love? The answer is always yes, no and only. If my neighbour stops playing synth pop at 3 a.m, every newscast features at least one street interview with someone in a tie-dye shirt, who, asked for an opinion, replies with a group hug. But underneath the spectacle, something real is at stake. Scientists beg for more research. Therapists plead not to criminalize healing. The government, ever cautious, issues statements about protecting the youth and maintaining social order. The subtext being that nobody wants to be responsible for a country full of emotionally vulnerable, well-hydrated citizens. In the end, the gavel falls. MDMA remains illegal. The war on ecstasy rages on, and the courtroom empties out into a world still pulsing with curiosity, optimism, and a touch of righteous indignation. Both sides claim victory. The politicians stumble over the name one last time for the evening news, and somewhere in the parking lot a defense attorney consoles himself with a box of orange Tic Tacs. It's a legal nightmare and a cultural milestone, a reminder that sometimes what happens on the dance floor doesn't stay on the dance floor. It ends up in court, with everyone trying and failing to keep a straight face. News anchors panic, daytime TV loses its collective mind, and somewhere Geraldo Rivera is trying MDMA on camera for journalistic integrity. The moral panic officially has a theme song. It's the late 80s, and if you believe the TV, America was one poorly supervised slumber party away from being overtaken by empathy zombies. The media, never wants to let nuance get in the way of ratings, discovers MDMA and immediately hits the big red button labelled national outrage. Local news stations, desperate for content between weather reports and school board meetings, now lead every broadcast with ominous music and stock footage of disco balls spinning in slow motion. Tonight at 11 is your child secretly hugging strangers in a basement. The shocking truth about ecstasy. Talk shows enter a bidding war for the most outrageous guests. Reformed ravers in neon overalls, anxious parents clutching rosaries, and experts who may or may not have gotten their credentials from the back of a cereal box. Dr. Phil isn't famous yet, but you know he'd be loving every minute. Oprah stages emotional interventions. Emotional. Sally Jessy Raphael hosts a rave rescue episode featuring a dramatic reenactment of a group hug gone wrong and a closing segment about the dangers of fruit punch. Every tabloid jumps on the bandwagon, usually with a cover headline like, "Parents beware. Hug drug turned my son into a professional DJ or secret nightlife. Teens dance, love and snack on citrus." Inside, the articles read, less like investigative journalism and more like a fever dream. There are warnings about secret signals involving glow sticks, wild speculation about rolling leading to spontaneous marriage proposals, and diagrams suggesting that any two people dancing within a 3-foot radius are, in fact, a cult. And the visuals? Oh, the visuals. Stock images of bug-eyed models in mesh shirts clutching teddy bears, surrounded by CGI lightning bolts, and the occasional menacing shadow labelled the dealer. Studio audiences gasp as MDMA tablets are displayed under glass domes, looking less like illegal substances and more like particularly festive Tic Tacs. Every TV segment features a concerned anchor who repeats the phrase "designer drug with mounting horror," then cuts to commercial for arthritis medication. Geraldo Rivera, never one to miss a cultural flashpoint, devotes an entire special to the phenomenon. He interviews anyone willing to talk, club owners, parents, that guy in the banana costume handing out hydration advice at raves. At one point, Geraldo volunteers to try MDMA in the name of journalism. The segment is predictably chaotic, ending with him complimenting the camera crew on their incredible spiritual energy and hugging the sound technician. Meanwhile, the rumour mill is in overdrive. Urban legends multiply with every retelling. Did you hear about the kid who mistook a glow stick for a drink straw? Or the one who danced for 20 hours straight and now can't listen to Cyndi Lauper without bursting into tears? School assemblies warn of the hug epidemic, complete with cartoon mascots and a catchy rap that does little to clarify the actual risks, but lives rent-free in your head for years. The panic spills over into politics. Senators call for tougher laws. Mayors vow to crack down on rave rings. There are op-eds in the newspaper, heated PTA meetings, and more than one parent grounding their child for listening to too much Depeche Mode. Yet for all the media noise, the actual rave scene only grows. Young people tune out the hysteria, club promoters double down on safety, and somewhere, Geraldo's sound technician tells his friends about the night television made him famous. MDMA's reputation morphs from miracle therapy to tabloid monster, and inevitably into myth. In the end, the only thing louder than the bass was the moral panic itself. A swirling, sparkly storm of confusion, caution, and cable TV drama. And somewhere, late at night, another news anchor quietly admits, "It did sound kind of fun, though." In a twist nobody saw coming, suburban mums start volunteering at raves, passing out bottled water and safe space vibes. Harm reduction becomes a thing, and so does peace, love, unity, respect, and yes, it's as earnest as it sounds. Somewhere around 1991, while the news screamed about the dangers of glow sticks and the government wagged its finger, a quieter, softer revolution was taking shape on the dance floor, one led by people who'd mastered the art of emergency granola bars and just wanted everyone to get home safe. Enter the rave mom. These weren't your helicopter parents or pearl-clutching chaperones. They were gentle, watchful, and oddly prepared for every crisis, with a Mary Poppins bag stuffed with snacks, band-aids, and enough bottled water to hydrate a small village. You'd spot them by the entrance, or at the chill-out zone chatting with the security staff and exchanging knowing nods with the DJ. Some wore tie-dye, some just looked like they wandered in from the PTA, but all of them radiated a level of calm that could only come from having survived both a garage sale and a slumber party with 8-year-olds. Their job, not to judge, scold, or shut down the party, but to keep an eye out for anyone who looked lost, lonely, or a little too enthusiastic about discussing the secret meanings of laser shows. It started as an informal gesture, just a handful of parents who realised that telling teens not to party was about as effective as telling cats not to nap in laundry baskets. Instead, they did the unthinkable. They showed up not to stop the fun, but to make it safer. Bottled water was handed out with a smile. Snacks and safe space were offered freely, no strings attached. If someone looked shaky, needed a break, or just wanted a non-judgmental listener, a rave mum would be there, ready to listen and, if necessary, hold back their hair. Empathy wasn't contraband. It was community. From these acts of compassion, a culture of harm reduction took root. Partygoers swapped stories about the best mum stations in town, the ones with actual fruit instead of just chips, or the legendary table with handwritten notes reading, "You are loved, drink some water." Flyers started appearing, not just with event details, but with tips for rolling safely, warning signs of overheating, and advice like, "If you feel weird, talk to a mum." There were even impromptu cuddle zones for anyone having a rough night, monitored by volunteers who'd seen enough teen drama to know the power of a kind word and a warm blanket. Out of this blossomed a new kind of rave philosophy. 3 words scrawled in Sharpie on bathroom mirrors and shouted over bass lines. Peace, love, unity, respect. Or, as everyone soon called it, PLUR. It wasn't just a motto. It was a survival guide for a generation navigating the beautiful, confusing wilds of warehouse parties. Peace. Settle your beefs before you hit the dance floor. Love. Offer a hug, not a punch. Unity. We're all in this together, whether you came for the music or the vibe. Respect. Don't be a jerk, especially to the mums. It sounds impossibly wholesome, but that's exactly what made it work. Harm reduction was never about letting kids get away with it. It was about meeting people where they were, building a community of care, and recognizing that the best antidote to risk is a little bit of radical kindness. Over time, the rave mums inspired a legion of imitators, rave dads, rave aunties, and entire squads of party volunteers, each one proof that looking out for each other was always cooler than pretending nothing could go wrong. So next time you see a bowl of orange slices, a friendly face by the exit, or a handwritten sign reminding you to hydrate, thank the unlikely army of rave moms who kept the party safe and the dance floor full of love. Because in a world of flashing lights and loud beats, sometimes the gentler saviours wear mum jeans and carry a spare bottle of Gatorade just in case. a handful of stubborn scientists refuse to give up on MDMA's therapeutic promise. Quietly, they keep researching, despite the government, the tabloid headlines, and the lingering smell of patchouli in their labs. While the outside world is panicking about hug epidemics and underground cuddle rings, a secret resistance forms in the least likely place, academia. Picture it. Aging professors in corduroy jackets, neurotic grad students running on vending machine coffee, and one or two psychologists who still have Summer of Love posters tacked up in their offices. These aren't your stereotypical wild-eyed rebels. These are people who get genuinely excited about brain scans, statistical significance, and a good blackboard marker. Yet they're now operating like covert agents in a spy novel, just with more paperwork and less chance of a car chase. Their mission? To prove that beneath the club kid glitter, there's a real, measurable value to MDMA. Maybe it's not the answer to everyone's relationship woes or the key to world peace, but these scientists have seen things. People reconnecting with their families, trauma survivors finding hope, tough cases opening up when nothing else has worked. The data, like the dance floor, is full of surprises. It's not glamorous. In fact, it's pretty much the opposite. Funding is hard to come by, especially when your grant application includes phrases like induced euphoria and potential for spontaneous group singing. University review boards get twitchy. Colleagues who used to nod politely in the faculty lounge now avoid eye contact, afraid you'll ask for help recruiting emotionally adventurous volunteers. There's always one administrator who mistakes clinical trial for illegal disco. Still, the true believers soldier on. They track down the rare patients who once benefited from MDMA therapy, compiling stories more moving than any after-school special. They publish careful, measured articles in journals nobody reads except other stubborn scientists. They learn to speak in acronyms, always ready to defend why PTSD and double-blind placebo-controlled study are better talking points than because it feels amazing. Trust me. Then come the roadblocks. The government, still fresh from outlawing the world's friendliest party favour, is less than thrilled to hear about research that might undo all that hard-won moral panic. Getting approval for a study is a bureaucratic triathlon. Every experiment requires mountains of paperwork, background checks, and at least 2 meetings with a very serious ethics committee. Even after all that, you still have to convince someone at the FDA that your subjects won't all run off to join a drum circle halfway through the trial. Meanwhile, the tabloids keep churning. Every time a new study makes a ripple, there's a headline. Doctors want to give love drug to grandmas, or science can't stop the hug. TV hosts invite researchers on air only to blindside them with footage of wild parties and dramatic music. The scientists sigh and try yet again to explain neurotransmitters to a guy wearing 7 friendship bracelets and a fake mustache. But here's the twist. It's working. It's slowly, surely, the evidence piles up. MDMA, in the right hands and right setting, shows real promise, especially for people battling trauma, anxiety, and the sort of existential dread only found after watching too many after-school specials. A few brave therapists start collaborating, running careful, well-controlled sessions with the approval of increasingly open-minded regulators. The stories that come back aren't about all-night raves, but about people rediscovering hope. By the mid-1990s and beyond, the conversation shifts. No longer just the hug drug or tabloid punchline, MDMA starts to reclaim its clinical reputation. The scent of patchouli never quite leaves the lab, but now it mingles with something else. Cautious optimism, scientific rigour, and the knowledge that sometimes the best revolutions start in the quietest corners. Because in the end, science, like empathy, has a way of coming back, no matter how many headlines try to chase it away. From London to Ibiza, MDMA culture explodes worldwide. Language barriers dissolve, and suddenly, everyone agrees on one thing. The universal sign for I love you. Man is a sweaty, uncoordinated group hug. It starts with a whisper. Well, actually, with a thump. Somewhere in a dark club in Manchester, a DJ cues up a record. Someone passes out a handful of mysterious little pills, and the rest is history. By sunrise, half the dance floor is clutching each other, beaming at the lights, and declaring lifelong friendship in accents that don't quite translate but still make perfect sense. News travels fast. By the early 90s, MDMA isn't just an American or British phenomenon. It's a global export like blue jeans and dubious sitcoms. In London, the club scene mutates overnight. Acid house takes over. Warehouse parties stretch until breakfast. And even the most reserved Englishman finds himself enthusiastically shouting, "Mate!" while hugging a stranger who may or may not be the night bus driver. The city's old boundaries, class, race, postcode, melt under the strobe lights. For a few blissful hours, the only thing that matters is the beat, and whether there's still some orange juice left in the communal jug. Meanwhile, on the sun-drenched island of Ibiza, MDMA culture becomes a movement. 1 part beach holiday, 1 part spiritual awakening, and at least 3 parts questionable wardrobe decisions. Clubbers from all over Europe descend on legendary venues like Pacha and Amnesia, spending nights in ecstatic reverie and days napping under palm trees, dreaming of the next big drop. Language doesn't matter. Everyone speaks the dialect of the baseline. You can order a drink, ask for directions, and find your friends using only hand signals, enthusiastic facial expressions, and the occasional group chant of "one more song." Elsewhere, the phenomenon goes viral in its own unique ways. In Berlin, abandoned factories become temples of techno where hugs are exchanged as often as cigarettes. Parisian ravers add their own flair, trading poetry and philosophy on the club floor, turning every after-party into an existential debate about love and the ideal sandwich. In Tokyo, a nation famous for its order and restraint, MDMA parties become bubbles of joyous chaos, neon-lit, meticulously organised and still, somehow including a guy wearing a full Pikachu onesie leading the room in a conga line. Customs and legends spring up country by country. In Italy, ravers develop elaborate rules for who gets to share gum. In Brazil, the dance floors pulse with samba beats and spontaneous declarations of "you te amo," I love you, to every person, dog and decorative plant in sight. Even in countries with strict laws, the spirit seeps through. Back alley parties in Moscow, pop-up discos in Cape Town, secret raves in Istanbul where, for a few hours, everyone forgets their troubles and joins in the worldwide symphony of grinning, overhydrated revelers. The side effects, of course, are universal. Lost shoes, new best friends, awkward post-party brunches where nobody remembers anyone's real name, and an international shortage of glitter. But what binds the global MDMA tribe together isn't just the music or the pills, it's the radical belief that strangers can become allies, that boundaries can be crossed with a laugh, and that sometimes the shortest distance between two cultures is a shared dance move. By the mid-90s, governments across the globe have noticed. Some try to stamp it out, others simply shrug and put up more recycling bins for all the empty water bottles. But the movement keeps going, because you can't outlaw joy, not when it's so busy learning to say "I love you," man, in 30 different languages, and so the love potion becomes a passport. No matter where you land, from Tokyo to Toronto, you'll find the telltale signs, the distant bass, the faint citrus tang in the air, and the happiest, sweatiest group hug you've ever seen. Who needs a translation app when you have a beat, a glow stick, and a heart full of international vibes? It's not all hugs and glow sticks. As the scene grows, so do the dangers. Fake pills, bad chemistry, and a handful of unfortunate incidents that make even the most optimistic raver reconsider their life choices. For all the legendary stories about dance floors and spiritual awakenings, there's a shadow that trails every strobe light. It starts small, a rumour about someone getting sick at a party, a friend of a friend who had a bad trip. But soon, it's clear. The underbelly of the love potion movement is a little messier and a lot more unpredictable than anyone wants to admit. First, there's the issue of what's actually in your pill. The underground world of MDMA production is, let's say, not known for its rigorous quality control. Your average bootleg chemist is less Marie Curie and more guy who once watched a documentary about chemistry and decided to experiment in his cousin's garage. Sometimes you get what you paid for, a night of joy, connection, and at least 3 new best friends. Other times you get something that glows in the dark, fizzes in water, or in one infamous case turned everyone's tongues blue for a week. It's a game of chemical roulette and not everyone wins. Fake pills are everywhere. Some are just caffeine, others are cut with household ingredients best left under the kitchen sink. Stories multiply. A batch of pills that turned out to be straight-up methamphetamine, another full of ephedrine and mystery fillers, one legendary batch containing, well, nobody ever figured that one out, but it made half a club insist they could speak fluent dolphin. Pill testing kits become a must-have accessory, right up there with the bucket hat and the glow necklace. There's always one person at the party swishing a drop of reagent on a new tablet and announcing, "It turned purple? I think that's good." Spoiler, sometimes it's not. And then there's the risk of taking too much, or not knowing how your body will react. The line between I feel like hugging everyone and I think I'm melting is alarmingly thin. Some people overdo it, convinced that if one pill feels nice, 2 or 3 must be even better. Instead, they end up overheated, dehydrated, or, in extreme cases, in need of a very real trip to the emergency room. The myth of just drink water turns into a curse for some. Overhydration can be as dangerous as dehydration, and nobody at 3 a.m. is checking their sodium levels. The social dangers creep in too. For every friendly crowd, there are a handful of partygoers with less than wholesome intentions. Purses go missing, rides home fall through, and sometimes the party ends in a city you don't recognise with friends you're not sure you even met. Harm reduction volunteers do their best. Mums and trained staff look out for people in trouble. But even with best intentions, things slip through the cracks. These stories don't get turned into tabloid headlines or cautionary school assemblies, but they're there in the background, whispered between friends and posted to message boards. Be careful, the warnings go. Test your stuff, look out for each other, and if something feels off, ask for help. The golden age of rave culture brings joy and connection, but it also brings wake-up calls, reminders that every scene, even one built on love, has its risks, and yet the dangers never fully erase the spirit of the scene. They just make it more honest. People adapt. Pill testing becomes normal, harm reduction takes centre stage, and the party learns to watch its own back. Because even in a world-chasing euphoria, reality finds a way to sneak in, if only to remind us that fun, like chemistry, always comes with a warning label. So before you take that next dance floor leap, remember, the best parties are the ones where everyone makes it home, safely, hopefully with all their shoes, and maybe just a little bit wiser than when the night began. As the decade ends, MDMA's official love potion era fades into legend. What's left is a trail of VHS tapes, embarrassing prom photos, and the slow, cautious return of MDMA to clinical research. It's the dawn of the 1990s. The hair is a little less feathered, the synths are dialed back, and even the most devoted ravers are starting to invest in blackout curtains and actual alarm clocks. The wildest warehouse parties are now the stuff of lore, whispered about by people who swear they were there before it got commercial. The laser light shows are replaced by desktop screensavers. The epic group hugs, once an urgent matter of national security, have become a safe joke at office holiday parties. No orange slices required. Still, the ripple effects of the MDMA revolution linger everywhere. Old club flyers and mixtapes are tucked away in shoeboxes, surfacing years later as relics for eBay and nostalgia-fueled TikTok trends. There's a Polaroid or two at the back of your high school yearbook, evidence of the time you wore a bucket hat, 5 necklaces, and enough neon to be visible from space. Every now and then someone brings up the hug drug and people get a far-off look, half amusement, half quiet longing for the kind of connection you only feel at 4 a.m. in a room full of strangers. Beyond the memories, the 80s left a new blueprint for fun and friendship. Rave culture's sense of unity, inclusiveness, and radical self-expression didn't disappear. It just evolved. By the time the millennium rolled around, peace, love, unity, respect had become an unofficial motto for entire subcultures. Kids who grew up watching their older siblings sneak out to raves would one day be adults advocating for mental health, safe spaces, and better party snacks. Meanwhile, on the fringes of polite society, a quiet scientific comeback was underway. Those stubborn researchers, the ones who never gave up on MDMA's potential, began to gather proof that the miracle drug might actually be, well, a miracle. Study by painstaking study, the molecule that once fueled sweaty dance floors found itself inside clinics and universities, helping veterans face trauma, couples rediscover connection, and scientists rewrite their own dusty textbooks. Of course, not everything about the legacy is golden. The war on ecstasy and its fallout left deep scars, lives upended, futures sidetracked, and more than a few folks left on the wrong side of the law for the crime of wanting to feel something a little extra on the weekend. But even this became part of the cautionary tale, a reminder that joy, like any powerful force, comes with consequences. Out of the chaos came harm reduction programs, pill testing, and an entire generation's commitment to making the next party just a little bit safer. For those who lived it, the 80s love potion era is a kind of bedtime story for adults, a time when feelings were big, boundaries were blurry, and the world seemed just a bit more magical, if only for a night. It's a story about the power of community, the need for connection, and the risks we're willing to take to find our place on the dance floor of history. So, as the decades roll on, the legend of MDMA lingers. Maybe you'll spot it in a movie montage, or hear about a new clinical breakthrough. Maybe, on a night when you're feeling brave, you'll hug someone just a little longer than usual and wonder if this too is part of the legacy. An echo of a time when all it took to change the world was a smiley face, a synthesizer, and an open heart. And somewhere, tucked between the VHS tapes and the crumpled flyers, is the quiet, persistent hope that the best parts of the party might still be yet to come. Looking back, was MDMA a miracle, a menace, or just a very enthusiastic phase in humanity's never-ending quest to feel less alone? Whatever your answer, one thing's for sure. History is never as tidy as we'd like it to be, and neither, apparently, is the floor after a rave. As the neon dust settles and the last synth note fades, the world is left with memories, some hazy, some hilarious, all tinged with a sort of gentle wonder. The 1980s, glorious, weird, utterly indefensible in terms of fashion, taught us that even the coldest, most buttoned-up society has a soft spot for connection. MDMA wasn't just a pill, it was a ticket to a new kind of party, one where you could swap stories, secrets, and hugs with total strangers and somehow feel like you were all in it together. For a moment, America, and much of the world, flirted with the idea that chemistry could solve loneliness, that the answer to big existential questions might be found in a tablet shaped like a smiley face, swallowed under the strobe lights and chased with orange juice. There was beauty in that optimism, however misguided, however naive. It was the belief that for a few hours anyone could be brave enough to open up, laugh at themselves and dance without shame or agenda. But the 80s also taught us the limits of easy answers. The thrill of MDMA came with a come down. For every legendary group hug, there was a Monday morning full of fuzzy regret, lost jackets, and questions about what really matters. Was it the pill? Was it the music? Or was it the wild, fleeting magic of 100 strangers deciding to trust each other in the dark, even for just one night? We learned a lot. That design a drug could mean anything from pure empathy to something best left unidentified. That even a movement built on love and unity could get tangled in law, scandal, and the unyielding bureaucracy of government. That no matter how many times Congress tried to legislate human emotion, people would still find a way to reach out, to connect, to care, to risk making fools of themselves for the sake of a little warmth. And of course, the 80s reminded us that every era comes with its own strange hopes and stranger solutions. Ours was the decade that believed you could hug your way out of a midlife crisis, that rave mums would show up at 3 a.m. with bottled water and encouragement, that somewhere a scientist was still fighting to prove that empathy deserves a place in the clinic, not just the club. Even as the scene faded, the echoes of its lessons lingered on. Be kind, be careful, and never underestimate the power of a good playlist. Maybe the real legacy of MDMA isn't about chemistry at all. Maybe it's about the courage to let yourself be silly, sentimental, even a little lost. About admitting, if only for a night, that you need other people and that needing others isn't a weakness but a wild, miraculous part of being human. So as we drift off, grateful for modern comfort and a world where hugs are mostly legal, we can look back on the 80s as a decade of spectacular messiness and stubborn hope. History is rarely simple, but if you ever find glitter in your pockets or an urge to compliment a stranger's shoes, you'll know. The spirit of the love potion era is still out there, waiting for the next song to start. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best kind of miracle of all. Before there were crypto bros, there were 80s MDMA dealers, regular people who suddenly realised you could fund your college tuition by distributing empathy in tiny Ziploc bags. It's the only time in American history that your accountant might also be your connect, and everyone in the neighbourhood is suspiciously interested in your pill press. It wasn't exactly Breaking Bad, but it wasn't the local lemonade stand either. The economics of ecstasy arrived with all the subtlety of a Miami Vice wardrobe. In cities and suburbs alike, the whiz kid with a B in chemistry and a cousin in distribution could turn Saturday night's kitchen into the epicentre of good vibes and questionable bookkeeping. This wasn't the underworld you see in gangster movies. This was the overground, hiding in plain sight, full of aspiring entrepreneurs with feathered hair and a closet full of neon windbreakers. Suddenly, everyone knew someone. My cousin's roommate's boyfriend can get you something was a line spoken with a straight face in everything from pizza joints to PTA meetings. Gym trainers, art students, and even the occasional out-of-work yoga instructor dabbled in the business, delighted by the fact that their side hustle involved little more than counting out smiley-faced pills and occasionally explaining to their parents why their backpack always rattled. And business was booming. The markup on a little chemical affection was enough to make even the most conservative economics professor blush. One night's work could pay for a semester's worth of textbooks, or at least the kind of synthesizer that made a party legendary. Parties themselves became semi-official marketplaces, with word of mouth as the only advertising needed. The phrase "ask for Dave" became so common that it's estimated over 40% of MDMA dealers in 1986 were named Dave, or at least answered to it for tax reasons. It was a barter system, but with more hugs. Can't afford the going rate. No worries, someone's always willing to swap a mixtape, a ride to the next warehouse party, or, in desperate cases, a near-mint copy of Michael Jackson's Thriller on vinyl. The deals went down in kitchen nooks, car trunks, and, in one legendary case, during a family barbecue where Grandma had no idea why everyone was suddenly so eager to help clean up. The wildest part was how normal it all seemed. School valedictorians and amateur magicians alike found themselves dabbling in the trade, drawn by the promise of easy cash, instant popularity, or just a really good reason to perfect their Ziploc sealing technique. No trench coats, no ominous shadows, just your neighbour, your cousin, or that guy from third period algebra who never turned in his homework but somehow always had enough cash for lunch. Of course, as with any boom, there were busts. Tales abounded of the dealer who got too ambitious and started advertising in the classifieds, or the would-be kingpin who mixed up MDMA with a home supply of Alka-Seltzer, launching a week of unusually bubbly dance parties. And as the authorities caught wind, the scene adapted. Distribution got sneakier, routes got more creative, and pill designs got increasingly ridiculous. Shout out to the Pac-Man batch, which glowed under blacklight but tasted vaguely like licorice and regret. As the 80s rolled on, the MDMA economy became a strange mirror of the decade's spirit. Entrepreneurial, chaotic, a little naive, and somehow just earnest enough to get away with it. Even as crackdowns intensified, the flow never really stopped. Like any black market worth its salt, or, in this case serotonin, it simply got smarter, friendlier, and more determined to put a smiley face on everything it touched. Looking back, it's a case study in supply and demand, sure, but also in the human craving for connection. Because for all the dollars and discount deals, what people really traded in the MDMA economy wasn't just a pill, it was a promise that for one night at least you'd belong, no matter who your dealer was. In the pre-Oprah days, your neighbour's living room could double as a healing space, complete with mood lighting, Enya on cassette, and the lingering fear that someone's dad would walk in at the worst possible moment. These hush-hush group therapy nights promised emotional breakthroughs, and usually delivered awkward group sobbing and a lot of apologising for stealing someone's couch pillow. If you ever wondered how suburbia in the 80s managed to be both stiflingly ordinary and deeply weird, look no further than the living room MDMA session. Once the stuff of clinical trials and the occasional ambitious therapist, empathy in a pill found new life among amateur psychologists and spiritual dabblers, many of whom had just returned from a yoga retreat in Sedona. It always started innocently enough. A book club here, a guided meditation there, and suddenly you're barefoot, sitting cross-legged, nervously sipping herbal tea as someone in the group insists that we all set an intention for the night. The decor was always familiar, yet subtly off. Potted ferns moved to create a circle of trust, lava lamps flickering in corners, throw pillows strategically scattered to soften the emotional blowouts to come. Sometimes a Tibetan singing bowl made an appearance, usually rung by the one guy who still used a pager. If you were lucky, there'd be incense. If not, a Glade plug-in in mountain rain. You could tell who'd hosted before by the number of coasters on hand. A true veteran knew you could never have too many when the night got weepy. Group therapy with a twist meant nobody quite knew the rules. There was always someone, let's call her Sharon, who brought a notepad, and someone, Brad, who started every sharing circle with, "I just think it's so beautiful we're all here, you know." Before long, the effects would kick in. Sharon would weep gently into the nearest pillow. Brad would launch into a passionate speech about how he forgave his childhood piano teacher. Someone would apologise to the houseplants for neglect and offer to water them, emotionally and literally. The breakthroughs could be real and spectacular if slightly ridiculous. Lifelong grudges evaporated between bites of carrot sticks. Couples reconciled over a shared blanket. Even the quiet ones, the ones who arrived promising they'd just listen, would be found hours later, hugging the host's Labrador and quietly promising to be more vulnerable at the next school board meeting. The emotional atmosphere was so thick you could cut it with a cheese knife, which coincidentally you'd need for the mid-session snack break. Of course, the setting came with built-in risks. More than one legendary session was interrupted by a stray parent looking for car keys, or an older sibling who'd wandered in hoping for leftover pizza, and instead witnessed a room full of adults gently chanting each other's middle names. And let's not even talk about the neighbourhood rumour mill. By Monday, someone's grandma had heard strange music and chanting through the air vents, and it was only a matter of time before an emergency HOA meeting was called. But perhaps the real magic was in how these sessions created new, suburban legends, tales of the Night of 12 Apologies, the epic blanket fort of 87. The time someone confessed their secret love for Enya, and was met not with mockery but with a tearful group sing-along. By sunrise, most people had processed something, befriended someone, and ruined at least one decorative throw. Looking back, these sessions might seem quaint or silly, an odd intersection of self-help and self-indulgence. But for the people who were there, they were something more. Proof that healing didn't need credentials, just a little bravery, a dash of MDMA, and a willingness to forgive both yourself and whoever ate the last of the hummus. In the end, every awkward moment, every honest confession, and every borrowed pillow became part of the fabric of the neighbourhood, a secret history of hope, healing, and suburban myth-making, all set to the soothing strains of Enya on repeat. Not everyone at the party is actually rolling, but thanks to the contagious optimism of the era, even tic-tacs can spark a spiritual revelation. The placebo effect turns mild-mannered accountants into dance-floor philosophers, and by midnight someone is giving a TED talk about the healing power of grape soda. There's something magical about the 80s rave scene. The music, the neon, the sense that anything could happen, including the very real possibility that your designer drug is actually just a designer mint. You'd think it would be disappointing to discover that your ticket to bliss was actually a tic-tac or a sugar tablet. But this is the era of radical positivity, and optimism is a more powerful chemical than anyone gave it credit for. It always starts the same way. Someone sidles up, whispers the magic words, "You want one?" and hands you a small mysterious tablet. Maybe it's got a smiley face, maybe it's suspiciously peppermint scented. You swallow it, feel a tiny tingle of anticipation, and suddenly, bam! The bass drops, the lights dazzle, and you're convinced you're experiencing a cosmic revelation. Spoiler, it's mostly the lighting, the energy of the crowd, and your brain's boundless desire for a good story. At first, you chalk it up to chemistry. Wow, this batch is strong! You tell the person next to you, who just so happens to be chewing on a Skittle and nodding in profound agreement. By the time the DJ cues up another synth-heavy anthem, you're deep in conversation about the nature of love, the healing power of laughter, and whether glow sticks might actually contain happy energy. Suddenly every conversation feels meaningful, every laugh a tiny miracle. A random guy named Todd launches into an hour-long monologue about his personal transformation, brought on, he swears, by the purest stuff he's ever had, which upon closer inspection was purchased in bulk from the clearance section at CVS. It doesn't matter. The mood is contagious. Next to him, two women in sequined fanny packs are hugging and crying about their shared childhood fear of clowns, bonded by nothing more than hope, sugar, and maybe half a can of Sprite. The placebo parade is, in its way, a scientific marvel. The brain, desperate for meaning, weaves miracles from suggestion and peer pressure. It's less pharmacology and more mass hypnosis, powered by the world's greatest soundtrack and the conviction that something magical is happening. Some people claim to see colours more vividly, feel music in their bones, or transcend the dance floor. Others experience the legendary jaw wiggle, in reality the after effect of 3 hours of non-stop grinning and enthusiastic attempts at the robot. As the night goes on, the legend grows. The placebo effect turns ordinary clubgoers into sages and shamans. The accountant who can barely muster a fist bump at the office Christmas party is now giving impromptu workshops on the spiritual significance of disco balls. The HR intern is leading a group in synchronized breathing, convinced she's cracked the code to inner peace. Even the bartender gets in on the action, claiming his homemade lemonade enhances clarity and opens the third eye, which is mostly just a clever way to sell more drinks. Of course, not everyone buys in. There's always one skeptic in the corner, arms folded, watching the proceedings with a raised eyebrow, and the kind of caution reserved for IRS audits. Yet even they can't resist the energy forever. Give them enough time and enough invitations to join a group hug, and eventually they'll admit that maybe, just maybe, there's something to this whole optimism thing, even if it's only the power of positive peer pressure. By sunrise, nobody remembers or cares who was actually rolling, and who was just really, really enthusiastic about tic-tacs. What matters is that for a few hours, the world felt a little lighter, a little kinder, and a lot more fun. The placebo parade marches on, proof that sometimes all you need to transform a night is a good story, a strong beat, and the willingness to believe in magic, grape soda or not. A select few managed to navigate the 80s rave scene with nothing stronger than caffeine and stubbornness. These heroes become the designated drivers, snack coordinators, and unofficial historians, quietly taking notes on everyone else's emotional journeys, while wondering why the orange slices taste weirdly spiritual tonight. You can spot them at every party, the clear-eyed warriors with car keys on their belt loops and a steely determination in their stride. They don't judge, don't lecture, and don't ever say, "I told you so." Instead, they smile serenely from behind a mountain of bottled water and protein bars, watching the festivities with the detached amusement of someone who knows they'll be the only one to remember all of it come morning. While everyone else is discussing the interconnectedness of all living things, the straight-edge crowd is quietly making sure nobody leaves their jacket behind or forgets where they parked. These are the party's unsung MVPs. Who else is going to keep the playlist running, reroute the conversation away from exes at just the right moment, or keep an eye on the friend who's convinced they can levitate? When the lights flicker and the bass rattles the windows, it's the caffeine-fueled few who ensure the vibe stays fun and who have already figured out the optimal snack-to-hug ratio for maximum emotional support. Being straight-edge at a rave isn't about being above the fun, it's about being next-level prepared. Snack tables are stocked with granola, pretzels, and fruit, cut into geometric shapes for peak visual appeal. Juice boxes are kept cold and distributed with the flourish of a Vegas card dealer. Someone always has extra gum and a pack of tissues, ready for those inevitable moments of impromptu group therapy. And of course, these sober guides become the party's unofficial documentarians. Someone has to remember who brought the glow-in-the-dark hula hoops, who started the group conga line, and who delivered the midnight monologue about why socks are the true path to enlightenment. The straight-edge outliers hold the collective memory for an entire generation of partygoers, though they'll never share the best stories without permission, and only when the mood is right. Not that it's always easy. There are moments of existential confusion, like when you find yourself being thanked for the 15th time in an hour, or when someone hugs you and whispers, "You're the real hero here," while gently sobbing into your shoulder. You endure philosophical debates about whether staying sober counts as being present or is just a different form of escapism. You learn to field 1,000 versions of "wait, you're not on anything," with a simple, reassuring smile. But there's a secret upside. While everyone else wakes up groggy, missing socks and half a friendship bracelet, you greet the sunrise with a clear head and a phone full of contacts you'll actually remember. You become the confidant, the logistics coordinator, and the person everyone wants to sit next to at breakfast. Later, as memories turn into urban legends, yours are the only stories that start with, "Let me tell you what really happened." Even in the most psychedelic chaos, there's something grounding about having a few straight-edge friends around. They make sure nobody goes home with the wrong shoes, keeps an extra water bottle handy, and can tell you, without judgment, what you did during Don't Stop Believin'. They're the designated survivors of the party, the only ones who can navigate a parking lot at dawn and still find the right car. So here's to the unsung heroes of the 80s rave scene, the caffeine-powered, memory-keeping, emotionally available guardians of the night. You may not have felt the music in your bones, but you kept the beat going for everyone else, and honestly, the party wouldn't have been the same without you. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a soft bed, without a single glow stick in sight, maybe spare a grateful thought for the wild optimism of the 1980s. You didn't have to smuggle empathy in your sock, explain to your boss why you're suddenly really into group processing, or risk having your deepest feelings surface at a warehouse party decorated like a laser printer exploded. After all, the people of that era survived more than questionable fashion choices. They navigated love and loneliness, experimented with hope in a capsule, and spent an entire decade trying to answer one very human question. Can you shortcut your way to connection? Or does every generation have to muddle through on its own? Spoiler, it's usually the muddling. Remember, what started as a lab experiment became a cultural phenomenon, and for a moment it seemed like the answer to life's mysteries was as simple as a smiley-faced tablet and a dance floor packed with strangers who genuinely, inexplicably, wanted to know how you were really feeling. But here you are, in a quieter time. One where hugs are free, therapists have diplomas on the wall, and the only thing you have to recover from is a minor bout of nostalgia. So let your mind rest easy. Be grateful for clean water, legal sleep aids, and the blessed absence of synthesizer solos echoing through your bedroom walls. History might be messy, strange, and often ridiculous, but it's also proof that humans keep trying, sometimes failing spectacularly, sometimes hugging it out, but always hoping for a little more love and a little less loneliness. Good night. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with just the right amount of 80s magic minus the serotonin crash.